Hey, what's up, you guys? Welcome to another episode of Taryn Swears. You are with me, hanging out, and I'm really passionate about talking about this topic today. It's been something that comes up often, especially working with clients over extended period of time, and that is talking about what to do if you hit a weight loss plateau. Kind of a hot topic and one that is certainly relevant to the whole process. So I want to take you through really 5 steps on how to identify and interpret if you are in fact in a weight loss plateau. There is nothing more frustrating than working your butt off, being intentional about your diet, drinking all the water, hitting your workouts, getting in your sleep, blah, 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 only to see or feel little to no results. I don't know why I can't get some words out, but hey, if you're watching me on YouTube, you have the great pleasure of seeing my hands fly all over the place. And if you're listening here on whatever podcast platform, just envision my hands going everywhere anytime I talk. But that's how I roll. So again, I want to break down these 5 steps on how to interpret a weight loss plateau, and most importantly, what to do if you are, okay? Because there is definitely small measures and steps to take into consideration. And I really want to make sure that we break those down almost like annoyingly and with a fine tooth comb, because your journey is exactly that. It's a journey. This is not a 4-week, 6-week, 6-month program. Like, this is something that you should be invested in for your lifetime, because you should always want to be in a good, healthy space. Are you always going to be chasing some sort of results on the scale? I hope not. But you might be here because you do have a significant amount of fat loss. And I really should change kind of the topic into a fat loss plateau versus weight loss. However, most people do kind of just take that correlation of, well, I'm at a weight loss plateau. And that's going to be, actually, just a spoiler alert, one of the things to take into consideration when we are evaluating it. But here's the deal. I understand when we hit these plateaus that it kind of prompts the feelings of, well, fuck it, I'm going to throw in the towel. It's not working. But honestly, what good is that? Like, if you throw in the towel and quit, then what? Like, that's a surefire way to see no results, and worse, probably build back on the weight that you had worked so hard to get to this point. Because a little plateau is a part of the process, and one that can definitely be adjusted as long as you're willing to take the time to break it down. So let's talk about what these 5 steps truly are to identify and interpret a plateau, and then what you're going to do about it. Okay, so step one is to really evaluate if it is in fact a plateau. So I've had to challenge a few clients that come to me that they're frustrated, that they're not seeing results anymore, and they follow, they've been eating healthy and yada, yada, yada. And then we really kind of have to interpret for them really what their actions have been to lead them up to this. So is it really a fact that the body has stopped seeing results, or is it that their body's happily in a maintenance mode? And sometimes that's a part of the process, is going through maintenance, right? Like getting your body to a point of consuming the amount of calories by way of macronutrients, your protein, fats, and carbohydrates, to match what your total daily energy expenditure is. And if you guys went through my workbook to set your macros, or maybe I set them for you as part of one of my programming options, then you probably realize that your total daily energy expenditure might be a little bit higher than what your consumption needs to be if you are, let's say, in a cut. And if you aren't familiar with a cut, you can go back to the beginning of my podcasts, and I break all that down. And this is really where I spend actually a lot more detail in my macro minded course, which is officially closed for registration. It's May 15th, and I've closed it up for the summer, and it will be back open in the fall. But you can still get a lot of awareness and knowledge by listening to my past podcasts. I have a ton of information on my website. So don't feel like, oh, well, you know what, I'm just going to, have just go crazy through the summer. Don't do that. But your body might actually really appreciate being in maintenance, and that doesn't necessarily equate to a plateau. All right. So take a little bit of an assessment on how long have you been going through this process, right? Like, how long have you been on this fat loss journey, weight loss journey? Did you just start? It's been 2 weeks. Have you been going at it for 6 weeks? Have you been going at it for 6 months? Right? Like, you need to really take a look at how long it's been to truly evaluate if it is in fact a plateau, or if your body is comfortably just settling into maintenance, which everyone thinks that you don't see results in maintenance. And as a matter of fact, that's when a lot of women, male clients too, but most of my female clients start to see a shift in their physical look, because they're starting to see a production of lean muscle while they're dropping body fat, even though their weight is not changing on the scale. So that's something you need to take into consideration too, is that how is your body composition? And have you taken before and after photos? Like, are you taking visuals of, front, side, and back to see from the beginning to where you're at right now to see if there is truly a physical change that's happening? Have you taken your measurements lately and look back to what they were when you initially did them? And if you didn't do them, like, I want to shake you, because that is a very big data piece that you get to collect over time. Taking photos, this how your clothes fit, your measurements, the weight, data point, but not necessarily the only data point. And if you're able to step on an in-body scan, you can understand what your body fat percentage is compared to your lean muscle mass, and that's relevant information. So if those are adjusting, you're not in a plateau just because the number on your scale might tell you that it's not moving. Okay. Step 2 is to rate your level of consistency in the past 2 weeks. Again, going to push a little bit, maybe make you feel a little uncomfortable, or you might want to like double middle finger. But a lot of people will claim that they hit a plateau, but not want to admit that they haven't been tracking their food as intently as they had when they started. So that's a big like eye opener as well. And so if someone says, well, I haven't been tracking as intently as I had, then the first thing I'm going to say, go back and track, because it's so easy to overconsume just like an extra 500 calories by, just mindlessly eating, or it's healthy. So having this isn't going to make much of an impact. And then guess what? That compounds. Or the whole reverse of that is coming up short on calories, which some people go, what's the big deal? That puts me into a deficit. That's good. But if you've been in a deficit for far too long, that's not necessarily what your body wants and needs. And then you get into what's called metabolic adaptation, and your body is now starting to adapt to where you're at calorically, because you're only serving your body, you're only fueling it so much. And so your body starts to adapt to that fuel intake over a period of time, right? And that's not just 2 weeks, but you can, like, if you know that your body needs and requires 2,000 calories, right? And you're like cooking with gas, you are pumped, you are hitting the weights that you haven't hit in a while. Your recovery from your high intensity interval workouts are incredible. Your sleep's impeccable. Your PMS symptoms are minor in compared to what they were before. And your clothes are fitting great, like all those things. And then you go into either an intentional or unintentional caloric deficit, and you stay in there for an extended period of time. Then your body has what's called metabolic adaptation. It's adapting to the amount of energy that it's getting, that it's receiving, and going, okay, well, I only have this energy that's being received, and so I have to adapt to it, right? So it's kind of like if you think about when you're building a campfire, right? Well, what do you put on the fire in order for it to produce the flames and the heat? Well, logs. Some people might be like, oh, I'm going to throw some gasoline on it, right? So when you continue to feed a fire logs, you're going to have this beautiful, energetic campfire, right? And as the night goes on and those flames start to dwindle because maybe, winding down, which isn't relevant to the process weight loss wise, but you kind of get the idea, the correlation there. You're not putting on any logs on the fire, so you're not giving that fire energy to continue, right? So it's starting to adapt with the fact that, oh, the fire is starting to subside because there's no extra fuel. In our case, there's no food, but in this fire analogy, there's no extra logs to fuel the fire to keep those flames going. So it's the same thing with your body. When you start to limit the energy, you limit the food, you limit your calories, then your body over time starts to adapt to that. And I will say one mentor and expert in this industry, Amber Brueseke, she's got an amazing podcast, Biceps After Babies. And this whole analogy was actually inspired by her podcast. So go check out her episode. I think it's number 277, if I remember correctly. But she talks about this, and it's just like makes so much sense, right? So take awareness of how long or what your level of consistency has been in the past 2 weeks to truly assess, is this a plateau? And if you haven't been tracking, then that's your first order of business. Get back into tracking. Okay, third thing, step 3, gauge the timing of the plateau. When looking at a true plateau, and before I'll even consider recommending a client to hop into another phase, we have to look at how long we've actually been in this plateau. And most of the time people hit these plateaus because, again, truth of the matter is they stop tracking. They get lazy on tracking because they've been doing it for so long. It's starting to get monotonous and they're a little bored of it. And, I think I'm eating all the things that I was eating that got me to where my results, but truth of it is things have either slipped and you've added a little extra this, or you've gotten less sleep. You've added a couple more bites of your kids' food back in. Maybe you're not measuring the creamer you're putting in your coffee, or the butter you're putting on your toast, or the peanut butter that you're scooping your apple. Like, those things start to matter. So you have to really truly look at the timing of the plateau. And has it been a week? Has it been 2 weeks? Or has it been 4 weeks? And if it's been 4 weeks and you've effectively been tracking and looking at everything, then that might be when we either do a reverse where we add more calories because your body's probably actually really settled with the amount of calories it's been consuming, and it's ready again for more energy that is just going to fuel your metabolism a little bit more. Or if you have been over consuming what your body needs in order to effectively get into fat loss mode, then we need to get into an effective caloric deficit. And there's multiple ways to do that. So let's jump into step 4, and that's making one adjustment at a time. So what people do frantically when they think they've hit a plateau is like, well, I'm going to go right into a caloric deficit. I'm going to cut out 500 calories a day. And unfortunately, that isn't always the answer. There's multiple ways to get into a caloric deficit. Yes, you could cut out some calories, and maybe it's really just taking a look at what are some of the bullshit calories that you might be eating. Are you drinking pop? Are you going through Starbucks and getting a really heavy coffee drink? Are you having a snack bar? Like, do you need the snack bar? Are you taking bites and not really tracking it or logging it? So those are just natural adjustments. Could you maybe add another cardio session to increase your caloric deficit? You're not cutting out calories, but you're just creating more of a caloric burn with that energy output by even just adding a walk. You don't have to go and do anything intense, especially if you know that if you're middle-aged and you know that you're more prone to an inflammatory response for high intensity cardio training. I do encourage women that, especially if you are familiar with your cycle, that you should be super aware of when it's appropriate for you to do HIIT, when your body's going to receive it well. That's really like in your follicular, maybe your ovulation phase, but again, you get to be the gauge of that. Your follicular phase is after your period, after your bleed. And that's when your hormones have re-regulated and they aren't super elevated and they aren't like bottom of the barrel dropped either. So they start to kind of rebalance themselves naturally. And that's when you find this natural resurgence. And when your metabolism is actually a little bit more efficient then and knows when to tap into utilizing body fat for an energy source, or just taking in carbohydrates and using that as an energy source versus wanting to utilize the body fat, right? To get into fat loss mode. So when you know that, okay, I have to change something, do one thing at a time. Whether you just start adding an extra walk a couple times a week, maybe you just increase your workout time by 10 minutes. Maybe you add an extra hour of sleep. Like, people dismiss that component as something that is a huge element to the whole weight loss process. Like, if you don't get in adequate sleep and you are shorting yourself by 2 or 3 hours of sleep, like you're only getting 5 to 6 hours of sleep. And I get it. You got kids, you need time to yourself at night. You don't want to sit there, like you just need to wind down. You need to sit in your bed and scroll through your phone and just escape. I totally get that. But if you are scrolling your phone and escaping for 2 hours, which means you aren't going to bed until 11 o'clock, and you know you have to get up at 5 to get your workout done, or you know you need to get up at 6 or whatever that time is to be ahead of your kids' schedule to get their lunches and all that kind of stuff. So you're robbing yourself of the sleep that your body actually needs to be able to get you into fat loss mode again. Then that's something to consider, because, hey, you know what? You'd be like, well, but Taryn, I was getting 5 hours of sleep and I was still seeing results for the last 4 months. Okay, remember this whole metabolic adaptation? So you might be getting in the energy needs that consumption wise from your food, but your body actually might now be adapting to its sleep pattern, but not in a good way. It knows that it's going to be shortened of that rest. So it just kind of works with what it has in reserves, but it's still starting to make an impact on other aspects of your life and your body, right? So, hey, giving you an extra hour of sleep, going to bed half an hour earlier, and maybe, sleeping in an extra half hour. So maybe you bookend it by adding a half an hour on each end to create a net effect of an extra hour of sleep. Just making that one adjustment could make a notable difference in just days. So don't underestimate that sleep component as being one of your adjustments to make. Another thing too, just to go back on this caloric deficit, is when we talk about metabolic adaptation, your body's adapting metabolically to something that you've done for a long period of time. So I'll talk to my middle-aged friends and clients that have been dieting for probably 20 years, right? Like, you might not think it and like effectively been on a diet, but you might have been consuming like very, very low calorically for far too long. So your body has basically adapted to this very, very low intake. So remember the analogy of the fire. Well, as those embers start to kind of peter out, and your body's doing that same thing, it's going, well, I haven't gotten anything extra calorically, any additional energetic intake. So now I'm just going to adapt what I do get. So over time, your body starts to adapt to that lower intake of calories. So sometimes just that small adjustment of adding an extra 200-300 calories might just stimulate that jump out of the metabolic adaptation. And you might just go, holy shit, I have a burst of energy. I feel like I lifted a little bit heavier today. I recovered that much quicker from my HIIT workout. I actually went for a run today and it felt great. My joints, my tendons, like everything just aligned well. I had a great night's sleep. So think about that, especially if you've been one of those people that have been on a diet for an extended period of time. Like, I'm talking like my Jenny Craigers, I'm talking about my Atkins, I'm talking about my, oh God, what else is there? Weight Watchers, right? Like, those tend to, or even better yet, 30-10, when they have you on an excessively low caloric intake of 900 calories. Like, what? No, especially if you're working out. So just change one thing at a time and see how your body starts to adjust. Okay. So last step 5, which I kind of started to bleed a little bit into with step 4, is to add more calories and see if you can bump yourself out of this adaptation. And oftentimes that could just be the thing that changes everything. And we get so fearful about overconsumption. And if we eat extra, it's going to make us fat. And I just want to, God, I really wish that I could get inside your brain and nourish it enough to say, by eating more calories, you're actually doing your body a favor versus the restriction mentality that you're currently in, you're doing more damage. Especially for my younger clientele, the ones that are in the thick of their, in the prime with their metabolism, my teenage clients, my early 20s clients that, really have unfortunately allowed social media and magazines to influence their intake and thinking that basically any calorie is bad and is going to make them fat. And it's so heartbreaking because I've had to unwind years of that thought process, years of this diet mentality to know that, God, I do so much better on a hell of a lot more calories than I was consuming probably in my my early 20s and late teens. I was probably starving myself aside from drinking, getting a lot of my calories through alcohol, which I don't recommend. So I might have had a light number on the scale, but by no means was I probably healthy from a body composition into looking strong versus just like skinny, right? Because you can consume a very low level of calories and then what? You get skinny fat. You guys have heard that term. And that's really that you are thin, but your body composition, you still are carrying a high volume of body fat versus your lean muscle because you don't have any muscle to work with because you're not fueling it enough and maybe not doing the appropriate workout to warrant building lean muscle. And so really just like empowering women to understand building lean muscle is so rad and it's so empowering, and strong is far more sexier than being skinny. And I do respect and understand that some just want to be toned, but being toned still means and requires having muscle. You can't be toned without having any muscle. Like, I'm not saying you have to go and do CrossFit and go do a 250-pound deadlift or a 100-pound chest press. You can still refine your muscles and build lean muscle using lighter weights and a higher volume of repetitions versus lighter repetitions, less repetitions, and heavier weight. So you really just kind of have to settle in, because I'm not one to say there's only one way to do it, right? As long as you're moving your body, you're lifting weights and prioritizing your weights and protein and sleep and water, like you're gonna get there. But I really want to try and get you out of that mentality that adding more calories is going to make you fat, especially if you are in this quote unquote plateau, perhaps. And sometimes it takes somebody to kind of peel the onion back for you to go take a look at everything, go, well, yeah, no wonder you're not seeing any results, right? It's because of this. And when you're in the thick of it, it's really hard to, identify those things. However, how I coach in my course is I really encourage my clients to be nutrition strategists. Like, you get to be the scientist. You have to be willing to collect data and take a look at it and be your best advocate. You get to interpret it and go, oh, I see those glaring things popping out at me. I am only getting 100 grams of protein where I should be getting 150. So I need to bump up my calories. And by way of, I'm going to start with protein. So when I say calories, I really mean collectively my proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, and really encouraging you to prioritize your protein from a nutrition standpoint, because most people are not getting in their protein. They're not getting in enough. They're probably falling between 60 and 100 grams of protein because they think protein is going to make them bulky or fat or whatever, and also tend to either go to two extremes on fats. They either go way over the top and consume an excessive amount of fat because they think higher fats and healthy fats are all the rage, and supposed to eat those, or you get the other extreme of, I go very, very low fat because I don't want to eat too many fats because it's going to inhibit my my ability to lose weight. Not true. Okay. Having a balance is where it's at. And I can't emphasize enough, being a scientist in this whole process is going to benefit you greatly. And you're the only one that's going to know what's going into your system and how it feels, and also what's coming out of your system from an energetic standpoint. Your efforts in the gym Are you truly pushing yourself in the gym? Not every day. Again, I've talked about this countless times, especially on Instagram, that you don't need to go max effort all the time. And maybe you need to peel back your max effort in order to be able to get yourself out of that metabolic adaptation. Because your body could just be in this kind of high strung, high stress from your workout that it needs to kind of be able to calm itself down and then start seeing results again, because now your body's like, okay, the intensity, I can't take that intensity right now, so I need to tone it down a little bit. And sometimes that's when I encourage clients like, hey, your cardio should just be going for a walk. Go hit the weights 4 or 5 times a week. Obviously not your max effort, not your 1 rep max 4 or 5 times a week. Maybe save that 1 or 2 times. Just, obviously you're going to hit different variations of your body, but you're not going to go and, do your max bench press 3 or 4 times a week. You're just not. Maybe you're going to go 1, or you're going to go heavy bench press 1 time a week. And then you do kind of accessory supportive weight bearing movements or body weight movements the other times a week, but you're still getting in weight training. And then the cardio preserved, your cardio is going to be more walking or maybe a light jog, or in that zone 1, maybe zone 2 category when you go to your favorite workout class. Like I can go to F45 and I can stay in that zone 1, still show up and go through the ranks of it because it makes me happy and I love being there and it's my people. And then there's going to be, 2 weeks later, I might go full tilt in that workout and just be completely depleted energetically, but in a good way. And I know there's a time and a place for that. So, and I only know that is because I know where I'm at. Like I track everything. I track my cycle. I know what I'm eating nutritionally. I know when I'm drinking enough water, when I'm having too much caffeine, and when I'm cutting my sleep out for, staying up to BS or be on my phone, So anyways, just to review really quick on those 5 steps, all right, on how do I really interpret if you're in a weight loss plateau is it really a plateau, right? Or are you just in maintenance? How would you rate your level of consistency in the past 2 weeks? Have you been tracking and logging everything and still seeing a plateau? And if so, then that might be when you need to go into a reverse. You need to add more calories. You need to bulk a little bit. Or if you are coming out of reverse and in maintenance, then you might need to get into a caloric deficit. Step 3, gauge the timing of this plateau. How long have you been in this plateau? 3 days, 1 week, 2 weeks, and even ladies, if you're having your cycle, you might find this ebb and flow. And so sometimes you're like, okay, well, I weighed at 142 on Monday and on Thursday I was 145. Is that really like going backwards? And I think that's another false interpretation of it not working or hitting a plateau, and failing to realize that women's bodies are going to ebb and flow with weight, especially if you have your period, because you're just taking in water and stress and your hormones are adjusting, and you just naturally are going to see an up and down in weight, especially if you're not being consistent of your consumption and maybe starting to identify which foods support various phases of your cycle, which I encourage you guys to go research that. It's really fascinating. And I do have bits of that on my website. But step 4, make one adjustment at a time. Don't go, okay, well, I'm going to cut 500 calories. I'm going to start going for a walk, as Terrence suggested that. And I'm going to go and get an extra 3 hours of sleep. Well, that's only going to be a good thing. But just make one adjustment at a time to start to really collect more data. I mean, the more data you can collect, the more just intel you're going to have to truly see where you're at. And then lastly, step 5 is trying to add more calories and just figure out what can bump you out of that metabolic adaptation. And again, that's really going to be steps 1 through 5. Collect that info, or 1 through 4, collecting your data and taking a look at it all spelled out and having it glaring in your face, going, okay, here's the God's honest truth of what I'm doing and not doing. And you know what? Unfortunately, reality is most people won't be honest to the process. They won't track and log, just because they have to be accountable. And sometimes they burn out, and that's just human nature. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're willing to own it and then just get back on track and start tracking your food, then chances are you're going to burst yourself out of it and you're going to be right back into seeing the appropriate body composition results for the appropriate duration of time, which should be realistic. And hopefully you don't have this like in your head, like, well, I got to see these results in 2 weeks. I want to lose 20 pounds in 2 weeks. Because that's not healthy and that's not the direction I want you guys to go either. So, anywho, I sure hope this was helpful. If you did find it useful, I would love your feedback. And if you would, just tag me on Instagram, screenshot this podcast, share it on your socials, tag me. But I want to hear from you. I want to know what's working for you and what's not. And hey, if you've got an idea for an upcoming podcast episode, I'd love to know because I want to show up for you guys. With that, I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Thanks for tuning in. And don't forget to subscribe so you get notified when the next podcast releases. Talk to you guys real soon. Bye-bye.